Welcome to The Print. I'm Sourav Barman. Today we are joined by Deep Halder, journalist and author, most recently of Being Hindu in Bangladesh and Untold Story. Deep has co-authored this book with Avishek Biswas, who teaches English at Vidyasagar College under the University of Calcutta. Welcome, Deep.
Thank you, Sourav.
Over the last 2 days, ever since Australia defeated India in the World Cup finals, we have seen certain reaction coming out from the Bangladeshi youth on social media and off social media. Well, I may be overreading what can be emotional outpouring, whatever outburst. Do you feel this is connected to the larger churn in the Bangladeshi society, which you have written about in this book, of a nation gradually moving away from its foundational ethos?
Yes, the answer is both yes and no. I'll tell you why. So I did a tweet based on the videos that came out of Bangladeshi fans celebrating India's defeat. And I said that, India needs to take a closer look at Bangladeshi society. While there is, of course, a strategic partnership between the two governments, the society in Bangladesh may have moved far away from India. There might be an anti-India sentiment in Bangladesh now, which is growing and which is true. But this specific instance that you're talking about, there are certain things in India that also happened during the World Cup. So a friend of mine from Bangladesh, who's a Bangladeshi married to an Indian, so she called me after seeing the tweet and she said, you don't talk about the fact that, I don't know whether you've seen it, but there's a very famous Bangladeshi cricket fan who comes to the stadium to watch matches wearing fake tiger skin. So when he was in India, it was taken off by Indians, and he was laughed at. Then, certain things are said about Bangladeshis across India.
It was in Ahmedabad, I think.
This was in Ahmedabad. But even otherwise, in other stadiums, sometimes they have felt early part of the game that, they're not being welcome in India. So she said, there's this big brother attitude that India has towards its neighbors, which perhaps found a reflection in fans cheering for Australia in celebrating India's defeat. And she said it's not necessarily a religious thing, a Hindu majority India versus a Muslim majority Bangladesh. Having said that, there is, of course, within the society, this particular instance apart, there is a churn, and what you referred to, the 1971 War of Independence and India's role in it, I think the current generation, it may be aware of it, but I think it does not necessarily look at India through that prism. I think there are other things that they look at and which are not very pleasant.
You mentioned in the book that your parents migrated from Bangladesh, which was then obviously part of undivided India.
Yeah.
And Abhishek's parents as well.
Yes.
So there were circumstances which forced them to make that move.
Yeah.
Do you think the factors behind those circumstances continue to be potent, and do you think those factors have in many ways shaped the journey of Bangladesh as a nation so far?
Well, from time to time there has been instances of violence, including very recently. This year, this happens during Durga Puja often. This year has been an exception. There has been very little violence that has been reported. Some instances of attacks on temples, no loss of lives though. This has been a good year. The Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasinas' son has also sort of done a video saying that this is how we want to look at Bangladesh. It's a country for everybody. In fact, Army League, the ruling party, they have a slogan that religion is personal but festivals are for everybody. But if not 47 and 71, the War of Independence also saw a lot of anti-Hindu violence. There were anti-Muslim violence also by the West Pakistani army against the East Pakistanis then. But a large chunk of it was directed towards Hindus. So I don't think it's that bad necessarily. Then again, in 2001 was another flashpoint when the BNP Jamaat came to power. So I don't think it's that bad necessarily in terms of the numbers of incidents of violence. But yes, I mean, it's a cause for concern for minorities in Bangladesh about the rise of radicalism in Bangladeshi society. if not in Bangladesh's polity necessarily, but definitely in its society.
Interestingly, you point out in your book that Bangladesh is the first constitutionally secular country in South Asia, having declared itself a secular nation in 1972, 4 years before India, because
Yes.
India became, word secular was inserted in India's, the preamble to the constitution in India through 42nd Amendment. Over the years, the Bangladeshi constitution has gone through several amendments,
Yes.
several changes, and Islam has been declared as the state religion of Bangladesh as well.
Yes.
At the same time, Bangladesh continues to be it continues to carry the term secular in its
Secular,
constitution. So, how do you explain this dichotomy?
There is a dichotomy because I think over the past decade or so, more than a decade, there has been a very secular government of Sheikh Hasina, but there you parallelly see a rise in the number of madrasas. You will parallelly see demands from civil society to make it more Islamic than it is. Now, it may not be the view of Dhaka or certain sections of Dhaka, but you can't neglect or look away from the other voices which are very prominent now. I mean, you have to look at what the Jamaat is saying, because this election they cannot participate in, but they are very popular across Bangladesh. You can't ignore what's said at the Waj Mahfils, where the religious preachers say all kinds of things.
So, Wajma Mahfils are essentially religious gatherings.
Religious gatherings, yes.
Where preachers preach.
Where preachers preach, they preach to Muslims and they preach Islam, but it also often, if not always, comes with a high dose of anti-minority sentiment. So, those generally happen in the villages. And that's also where often the violence takes place. So you can't look away from all those. The Sheikh Hasina government has tackled terror, Islamic and otherwise, but there is within the civil society a churn which you cannot ignore. So what you said, that it's state religion is Islam, but it's secular. So I think this dichotomy Bangladesh is going through. Also, I think the Indian view, rather the view of the part of India you and I both come from, is you go to our singers, songwriters, filmmakers, artists from West Bengal. They often go to Bangladesh, and there's a lot of cultural exchange, which is all very fine. But I think they go to these 5 neighborhoods in Dhaka, which are very sanitized spaces, and they think that this is Bangladesh, but it's not. You should go out and you should see for yourself the lived reality of minorities in Bangladesh. So which may at times worry you. There is a pushback. The syncretic culture of Bangladesh, it still exists. I've seen it, and not just in Dhaka, not just in the sanitized spaces I spoke about, but it exists even in the small villages. But parallelly, there is a rising threat against minorities, which you can't ignore.
So, how have we come to this pass? Because Bangladesh, the foundational idea of Bangladesh was something entirely different. And over the last, at least, so Sheikh Hasina is aiming for her 4th term in office. So, an Awami League, the party she represents, she leads, stands for secular ethos. So, has the Awami League essentially just paid lip service to the idea of secularism? What do you think?
See, Awami League is a huge party. Let me tell you a politically incorrect thing. For instance, let's take Bengal and let's take the BJP. The BJP in Bengal is a party that before the last election and even before that took a lot of people from other parties. Now, whoever is coming in, do you think they necessarily always believe in what BJP stands for? Sometimes you take candidates from other parties because of their winnability factor. People jump ship because they think that future is better if they sort of go to a party which promises to be there for a long time. Now, Sheikh Hasina has been in power this term for 15 long years. She's running for office for the 4th time this term. In this stint. So there are a lot of people from other parties who have come in Awami League, and do they necessarily believe what Sheikh Mujib had to say or what Hasina has to say? When they go back to their constituencies, do they follow what they say in Dhaka? So I think it's a bit of that. So party, I think in Dhaka and officially to the world, I think it still holds on to secular values, But does everybody in Army League, which is such a huge party now and which has been in power for so long, necessarily believe what they're saying? I would not think so.
That's an interesting point you made. Come January 7, when the elections are supposed to be held in 2024, what is at stake? What is at stake for Bangladesh, and more importantly, what is at stake for India?
India can't afford to lose the only friendly neighbor it has. It has had a very good government-to-government relation under Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. There is a strategic partnership. The G20 summit gave you a lot of photo-op moments between the two leaders. And even otherwise, when I think there was a huge protest in Bangladesh when Modi visited Bangladesh, but she quelled those protests, and it was a good trip. Likewise, I think Hasina is welcomed in India every time. But so she, at this point in time, I don't think there's an alternative apart from Hasina. And on the other side, though Jamaat can't participate in the polls,
right.
The Supreme Court has ruled that out. But it said in a statement, I think only last month, that it doesn't want man-made laws in Bangladesh anymore. It wants Sharia laws. So imagine saying it out loud. I mean, it's one thing to sort of dream about it, but they're saying it out loud for everybody to hear. So BNP's past record has not been anything to write home about if you look at it from the minority prism, and also their how they look at India. So I think for now, the January 7 elections from India, you can only hope that Sheikh Hasina comes back to power.
Right. While Sheikh Hasina's return to power may favor India or India's interests, Sheikh Hasina has also faced a lot of criticism over the years for muzzling dissent and jailing opposition voices, and even in the last few weeks, hundreds of opposition leaders have been put in jail. So, do you think that has affected her image as a leader in Bangladesh and globally?
There was a Time cover with the headline "Hard Power," which was critical of Hasina. The foreign press has, over the past few years, have spoken about the suppression of the opposition voices and free speech and all of that. There have been very damning reports about some of the paramilitary forces, midnight knocks and forced disappearances and violence and all of that. And some of it I believe is true, but there are many voices now against Hasina within Bangladesh, political and civil, from the civil society. But I think this is also parallelly there has been growth. There has been a lot of infrastructure development.
Yeah.
There has been at least an attempt to maintain the secular ethos of the country, even if there have been lapses from time to time. 2021 was an example. Across Bangladesh, there were anti-Hindu riots during Durga Puja. So yeah, I think this term, if she comes back to power, she has to address those concerns. I think the world is watching. America is keeping a very close look at Bangladesh, and articles are being written. Even in India, I think critical articles have come out against sort of Hasina holding on to power the way she is. But yeah.
Coming back to the book, this book talks about the repression the Hindus face in Bangladesh and the sharp dip in the number of Hindus in the total population of Bangladesh over the years, and the waves of violence against Hindus in 2001, in 2021. Do you think the fear that there might be a time in the near future when there will be no Hindus in Bangladesh, do you think that fear is exaggerated, or do you think that is real?
One very prominent Bangladeshi writer has written about this, that 30 years from now there won't be any Hindus left in Bangladesh. People I have spoken to in Bangladesh from the minority community, I mean, they fear that, but they don't necessarily think that that would be the case. They think that they can still dream of a Bangladesh where which is not free of all Hindus. You have to also remember, Sourav, that from outside, when we look at Hindus in Bangladesh, we only talk about them when there is an instance of violence, But there are also, but if you go to Bangladesh, there are also Hindus who are doing exceedingly well in business, in government jobs, in corporate jobs. You know, there are major generals in the army. There are police chiefs, and there are corporate leaders who are Hindus, and a lot of the bureaucracy in the bureaucracy there are Hindus in very prominent spaces. There are MPs, of course, and ministers, but so it's not all gloom and doom for everybody at every time. So to say this, I think would be a bit of a stretch right now. But yeah, like I said, that you have to constantly look at Bangladesh, and you have to look at Bangladesh beyond Dhaka or beyond government to government contact. You have to also, our think tanks and sort of our journalists and our writers need to constantly look at Bangladesh, because, like I said, it's the only friendly neighbor you have for now.
And you also talk about the large followings that a lot of Hindu mystics like Ram Thakur and Baba Loknath and many other mystics have in Bangladesh, and also the popularity of the Matua sect in Bangladesh, and how they point out that while the number of Hindus might be dipping, the number of Matuas are increasing. So how do you explain that?
It's so it's amazing if you go to some of their if you on those specific days which are considered pious. If you go to, say, Ram Thakur Ashram or Loknath Baba Ashram or the Motua headquarter, you will see so many people will think you are in Bengal, West Bengal, and it's thriving almost. I mean, and there are no sort of attacks, at least on the times when I was there. And you're preaching the faith, you're practicing the faith. Various subsects of Hinduism are sort of they continue to operate there. Even Muslims in the villages, I have seen Muslims also go to the Mutuas, or to Ram Thakur Ashram. Not always maybe to pray, but they go to participate, definitely. So that is also a parallel reality which you can't ignore, and that's also where the hope is. That beyond the rhetoric, I think the civil society, while there are problem areas, there are also this. Not proliferation, but at least continuance of various subsects of Hinduism that continues to sort of engage not just the Hindus but also village Muslims. There are instances, in fact, I did a story for ThePrint where a 300-year-old Kali temple is being rebuilt by Muslims of that village. So that's also true. But whether you can extrapolate and say, okay, this is Bangladesh and that's an aberration, I think that's not true. So I think these two things are happening parallelly. It's very difficult to say which is moving faster. Whether radicalization in the society is overshadowing the syncretic culture, which I think it is. But you have to keep watching to see what the future holds for Bangladesh.
And lastly, in the next general elections, which is due shortly, do you think there is a possibility that Sheikh Hasina and the Awami League is going to get a walkover because the opposition is not going to participate at all?
Jamaat can't participate. For now, the BNP has said it won't because it does not believe the elections are free and fair. So I don't see a situation where Sheikh Hasina won't be coming back. I think it is Sheikh Hasina again. Unless things change. I mean, it's January 7th, so there's still some time left. So unless things change drastically, I think for now, I think it's Sheikh Hasina who's going to come back to power.
Thank you for this engaging conversation.
Thank you
so
for
this book. Thank you.
Thank you.